With Spectrum, a software platform for the architecture industry that seamlessly integrates computer-aided design software with sustainability analysis. In the last 10 years, energy codes, energy efficiency standards, and green building rating systems have proliferated globally. And while this is certainly great for the environment, U.S. architecture firms will waste over $6 billion this year trying to navigate these complex codes. Current solutions do not relate design decisions with building performance. They analyze only a portion of a building's impacts, and they fail to provide suggestions on how to improve a design, leaving an architect to trial and error methods. As a result, architects wind up reworking their designs and extending project costs by 10%. Spectrum introduces building performance feedback earlier in the design process, shortening projects, reducing costs, improving building performance, enabling code compliance, and enhancing decision-making. Spectrum's platform integrates CAD software, analysis tools, and cloud-based algorithms. The technology requires only 3 inputs, generates many design options, and allows architects to easily identify high-performing solutions. John Baspigill is a postdoctoral fellow in civil engineering at Stanford, with a background in building life cycle assessment. Sergio Tarantino is a PhD student in civil engineering at Stanford with a background in building energy modeling. Zach Wolf is a strategic planner and has an MBA and master's in civil engineering from MIT. We have spoken with 200 design professionals and are partnering with 30 architecture firms on prototype development. Our technology has been validated on 2 projects, saving architects 21% in lifecycle costs and preventing the emission of over 2 million tons of CO2 equivalents. You can learn more at buildspectrum.com.
You just saw a video that's an illustration of one element of the type of things that have been happening around the economy, and that's the energy efficiency. What I'd like to do today is go fairly quickly over things that are a basis of a book that'll be coming out this summer on looking at how energy efficiency has really led to tremendous changes in energy security, economics, and the environment. If you think about the impacts of energy efficiency on the economy, I like to think about this energy policy triangle of the economy, the environment, and security. Environment, the cleanest energy you could possibly have is the energy you don't need to use at all. Second, security, we'll see that the dominant way that we have reduced imports of energy into the United States, bar none, has been energy efficiency. And that's given us the energy security. And finally, based on the economic, most of the things that I'm going to be talking about happened in the private sector because they found it economically attractive to do in energy efficiency. So when we start about energy efficiency, what I used to go about talking about most of the time is that there are some barriers to getting all the energy efficiency we want and we should get, and that's economically efficient. Those barriers still exist, whether they're in market failure, institutional, or behavioral issues. They're still out there, but that's not what I want to talk about. That's the cup half empty. I want to talk about the cup 90% full so far. But the good news about the barriers is that when you fix the barriers, you get even more energy efficiency than I will be talking about. So let me start with some examples of what we've all seen, the ongoing lighting revolution. First, the compact fluorescents that using 13 watts to replace a 60-watt equivalent. This one you can now buy at the store for $2. If you want to spend more, you get an LED that gives you beautiful light, dimmable. 11 watts replaces 60-watt incandescent. You have motion sensing, light switching, light sensing switches, turning off the lights in offices. I always used to tell my kids, turn off the lights. You don't have to do that for me because it turns itself off. So I just would have to worry about my own kids. So what's this in aggregate? What does this matter? If we look at the different functions of energy, different lighting functions, we have things like light bulbs. The watts per lumen reduced 83%. At the lower level, we have the office lights from the fluorescence, the T12 fluorescence. Going to LEDs, we have a 48%. Track lighting, 87%. Lighting is a big impact of being much more efficient. Automobiles. This graph goes back to 1923, thanks to Michael Civic and Brandon Schodel. If you look at before, and I have a blue line at 1973, that was the oil crisis, that was the embargo, that was a shot across the bow that changed everything. Before that, the average miles per gallon of all vehicles on the road was declining till 73. On the average, we were getting about 12 and a half miles per gallon cars on the road. Once we had the oil crisis, we started CAFE standards, corporate average fuel efficiency standards. We had increased price of gasoline. We had private sector responses, and the miles per gallon have continued to go up. So cars now have roughly twice the miles per gallon. Translated, that means half as much fuel for every mile it drives. So we see the big change in transportation. Oops, I want to go backwards. Energy intensity of air travel. Go back to 1970 versus now, and there's been roughly a 50% reduction in the amount of fuel per seat mile of passengers. And that's primarily better technology, but some of the thing is the seats are scrunchier. We pack more people in a given airplane. And we have, it's been a reality, it's been a 2-to-1 change. But really, energy efficiency is really measured not in seat miles, but passenger miles. How much fuel does it take to move a person? And that's what happens to passenger miles. There's been a 4-to-1 change in passenger miles. And why is that? Well, it's because the airlines have mostly used sophisticated yield management software, pricing mechanisms, behavioral rules to get people to get in the airplanes that would have some extra capacity, fill those up. The changing capacity factor has been just as important as the changes in technology. So since 1970, we use 1/4 as much fuel per passenger mile of flying. I think of the federal government as probably the least flexible and being able to actually move forward in changes like this. But if you look at the energy intensity, energy per square foot of government buildings, it's gone down by a factor of 40% in that time. Refrigerators, many of you have seen this. In 1972, a new refrigerator would use about 2,000 kilowatt hours per year. The newer ones now use a little bit below 500, a factor of 4 change in the refrigerators, and it's not because they've gotten smaller, they've actually gotten bigger. It's not because they've gotten more expensive, they've gotten cheaper. So we've had refrigerators made that difference. In the industrial sector, there is such a blizzard of different things that have happened, it's hard to just categorize one or two. And the rest of our session, after my brief opening points, will be talking about something that's happening in industry. Michael McQuaid will be talking about that. This is just one example in Microsoft. The use of big data for monitoring electricity or energy use in each one of its facilities from the central headquarters on different time scales. It can look at on building by building, different time scales, and find out where they're having energy problems and quickly dispatch people to deal with those energy problems, again, significantly reducing the energy use that they've had. So those are individual cases. Well, can we look at what's happened overall in the economy? Again, I draw this curve in 1973, and this is everything in units of total use of energy, quadrillion BTUs. Before the energy crisis, the industrial, transportation, residential, and commercial sector were growing, and it was growing right around with the economy, the aggregate, minus about 0.5%. Then we had the shot across the bow, and look at the industrial sector. Instead of going up there, it's moves up and down. We use about as much energy now in the industrial sector of U.S. as we did in 1973. But it's not there. Transportation sector, the curve is bent downwards. The residential sector, the curve is bent downwards. Same with the commercial sector. So for each one of these various sectors, instead of continuing the march upward in the use of energy, we've sharply reduced it. Now, the industrial sector, you may say, well, it's China. Actually, it's not China. You may say its industrial sector has collapsed. It hasn't. It's continued to grow in the U.S. But about half of this change seems to be changes in the nature of the products the U.S. industry is producing. Still high value, but less energy-intensive products. And about half of it is less use of energy for the same sort of products. So we've had a pretty fundamental change. So let's put the big picture of energy supply and demand imports. If we had followed the pre-1973 trends of energy use, we would, and we continued to grow 0.5% less rapidly than the economy grew, we would have followed that red curve up to 180 quadrillion BTUs, 180 quads. What we've actually done is follow that blue line, and so we're down to about 100 quads of energy. So this light gray is the actual net imports, and we've heard that we've now gone from a place where we had a scary lot of imports and we were extremely vulnerable to what was happening in the rest of the world in the energy space. Now the amount of imports are down to what they were in 1973. What's caused that? Well, that amount is energy efficiency. That amount is everything that's happened on the supply side of the market together. That's oil and gas fracking. This black is fossil fuels. You notice it's slightly up from what it was in 1973. The purple's nuclear. The green is the renewables. Now, those renewables, I have to be careful about it. It's primarily hydropower and combustion of wood. Only a small fraction of that's wind and solar. But we now have imports down to a small amount dominantly because of the energy efficiency. Now, am I saying that if we didn't have these energy efficiency programs, we would be importing 80 quads more? No, because the world market wouldn't handle that. We would not be worrying about shale oil at less than $40 a barrel. We talk about how the economy would survive with oil above $250 a barrel. So that's the bad news for you people in the oil industry. It's the good news for the rest of the U.S. economy. And finally, I want to talk about the carbon dioxide intensity. Carbon dioxide per dollar of GDP. It's important to know, and this is very consistent with what Pete Trellenberg was talking about going in the future in the U.S. Carbon intensity has reduced by 61%. We now are carbon dioxide per dollar of GDP is only 39% of what it was in 1973. So what was behind that? This blue was the energy efficiency trends that were happening before 1973. This was a march of innovation and technology that was happening independent of the oil crisis. The green was the additional effect of those curves turning down in the whole energy sector, energy use sector, so that the blue plus the green is the decarbonization of the US economy because of reduced energy intensity of use. The black is everything that happens on the supply side of the market. That's moving natural gas in place of coal, plus nuclear power, plus wind, plus solar, plus geothermal. And then if you want to break it down, 60% of that little area is nuclear power. So 40% of this little area is what we've done so far in wind and solar and geothermal and fracking for natural gas and so forth. So while there's been tremendous changes so far at an industry level, if you think about the whole economy, the action's been really energy efficiency. Now, rather than sound like I'm attacking renewables, I'm not. So I think what's happening right now and looking forward, and Pete Trollensberg's numbers were just consistent with this, energy efficiency is going to be what keeps in the OECD energy use down under control, waiting for the supply side of clean energy to catch up. Ultimately it will, but this is what's going to keep it in control and has been keeping it in control, so we have a chance for the renewables to catch up. So at this point, I'd like, somehow I wanted to go. I'd like to call up Michael McQuaid. Well, okay. Could you put on that screen just one moment? It disappeared. The last screen that tells people how to get the book if they want to. Okay. Right quickly. It's going to be published this summer by Hoover Institution Press. But if you can download it from the Peace website if you're at all interested. Okay, Michael.
Hi.
Hi. So we have the rest of our 40 minutes. We have 23 minutes left with Michael McQuaid, who's Chief Technology Officer of United Technologies, in conversation. And let me start out with the first question. Tell the audience about United Technologies, because if you focused on the energy industry, rather than all that's going on in the rest of the economy, you might not know all about United Technologies. Tell us something.
So let me give you the 2-minute tour and actually relate it to why I'm here to talk about energy efficiency. So we're about a $60 billion company. Half of the company is aerospace. So we make jet engines and then just about everything else that goes into an airplane except for avionics. The other half of the company is all of the stuff that goes in buildings. So carrier heating and air conditioning, Otis elevator, security systems, fire suppression systems, et cetera. And as an outgrowth of the carrier business, we also have a significant business in transportation refrigeration. So if you think about those three, let me give you just 3 statistics as to why energy, greenhouse gas emission, energy efficiency matters to us. So air travel is about 2% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Buildings are about 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Our customers obviously care. And a statistic that is actually quite remarkable is that food waste, food that is planted and never makes it consumed by the consumer, food waste is about 30% of the food in the world that's planted. It turns out that the carbon dioxide equivalent of the energy and other resources that go into food waste is about 3.6 gigatons, which means if you considered food waste as a country, it would be the third largest emitter in the world. So 3 places where we actually care about the performance of the energy that our customers have to use in the products we sell them.
So how do you personally fit into this?
So I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the company. There are 20,000 engineers in the company. They certainly don't need me to tell them how to do their job. I provide a bit of oversight to the business units of the company. We also have a substantial research center that cooperates with universities, with our business units, and with the national labs, the DOE, for example. And I provide oversight to that. And in general, my responsibility is to ensure that we have the technologies and the processes to deliver the solutions that our customers want. And more, that means the energy efficiency technologies that our customers are demanding.
So if you think about energy efficiency in UTC, I think about 2 things. You're making decisions that influence energy efficiency of your customers throughout the whole US and actually worldwide economy. And you're making decisions that influence your own internal energy efficiency. I'd like to talk about both of them if we could. So first, internally, do you have a generally agreed upon philosophy that's guiding what you're ending up doing here in the energy efficiency space?
Yeah, so we have a sort of a 3-prong approach that ties these 3 things together. So in the center are the products that our customers want. And to be very clear, we're not a world-class marketing company. People buy stuff from us because it technically outperforms. And more, that definition of technical outperform has to do with the energy that's consumed. To make our customers have confidence in our ability to do that, we actually believe that we have to demonstrate that we operate in an energy efficient fashion. So we have long established goals. We set our first sustainability goals for the company starting in the mid-1990s. Give you just sort of a definition of performance. And we actually don't track energy consumption or greenhouse gas emission or water. We don't track it as it relates to revenue. We track it in absolute terms. Between 1997 and 2014, the company grew by a factor of 3. Went from $20 billion to $60 billion. Our energy consumption globally in the company went down 30%. Our water consumption went down 50%. That's great for us because, frankly, it saves us a lot of money. We invested $200 million over the last 6 years to deliver energy efficiency on the order of $60 or $80 million a year savings to us. So that's all good, but it also, for us, is a proof point to our customers that we actually can operate in that fashion. We'll talk about products in just a second. The only thing I would say is if we do the right thing internally for both sustainability reasons and financial reasons, if we deliver to our customers, in some sense we believe that gains us the privilege of then being able to advocate with all of you in the room, to advocate with the NGO community and the government community. So.
Now, some of the things you did internally, you mentioned investments as technology. Is it all technology or are there managerial changes that you've made that make a difference?
Well, if anybody's been watching the news lately, we've had a lot of managerial changes, but that's not quite what you had in mind, I think.
I had in mind.
So it's a multi-step thing. It is clearly technology investments in cogen, investments in relighting factories, et cetera. But it is also a very significant cultural change in the company. We are an engineering company. Even in the management of the company, we manage very clearly by a set of numbers. And at a point, when the senior management of the company decided energy efficiency was a relevant thing for us to be worried about, we established goals at the business unit level. Our business units have a lot of autonomy and flexibility. So we're not a company, for example, that I could show you the sort of energy evangelist program for the young employees in the company. I can't show you, for example, the uniform program across the company where everybody who drives an energy efficient vehicle gets a better parking spot. And in Connecticut, that's not a bad thing. But it really is a top-down driven set of metrics. We operate all of our businesses on establishing very strict and very large goals. And starting in the mid-90s and growing over the last 15 years or so, sustainability, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emission, et cetera, became a very big part of that.
Great. And before I go to the next question, let me tell people out here that I have a set of questions, but I'm counting on you writing some questions on, and they be sent out here, and that we can pass forward. So you've talked about these goals. Do you have any knowledge? You talk with other industries, other people are managing it. Are you alone in doing this, or do you see this broadly across the industry?
I think we do see it broadly. I think maybe we're a bit more rigorous on the scale than some companies, but I don't think there's any secret sauce that we have here, particularly for large industrial companies. It is in many ways a sort of existential issue for us. I mean, the amount of money we would have had to spend had we not dropped that energy use in the company by 30% is measured in the billions of dollars. It's not measured in small numbers. And so I don't think that we're unique in that sense. I think maybe we're a little more sort of aggressive or on the side, but I don't think it's a unique situation.
So is it fair to say this is mostly a profit motive? The federal government wasn't telling you how to run your business, right? That was pretty much private sector driven, economic driven.
Right. So absolutely yes. I would say that the regulatory issues for the government have more to do with EH&S than they do with energy, et cetera. And I would say that when we started our sustainability journey, it started as a regulatory compliance journey. But it rapidly turned into a sustainability journey for both the company. And as I said before, I keep coming back to this, because of how we sell to our customers, because of what matters to them, we think it's really a critical element of the company to be able to walk the talk before we can actually convince customers that they ought to be buying products from us that are more efficient and more sustainable.
So we've talked a little bit about what happens in your company, but then there's the products you sell. Can we turn to energy efficiency related to the products you sell? Because it's almost certainly the case that the biggest impact you've had is on transportation, food waste, refrigeration, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and so forth throughout the whole economy. So let's talk about aircraft. You know, I noted the fuel per seat mile has cut in half. Have you guys played a major role in that, or a significant role?
We have, and as an industry, fuel efficiency has been on a steady increase. So fuel consumption's been on a steady decrease. A couple of percent per generation of new jet turbine engine has been a good parameter over the last sort of 40 years. We started an investment about 10 years ago. We're about $10 billion into that investment, and I'm proud to say we had the first commercial paying customer flight of a new aircraft from Airbus that has a new Pratt & Whitney engine on it. That engine is 18% more efficient than the engines that it replaced. So it's a re-engining of the A320. It is a 200% technology play. It is a new geared architecture on the plane. It's a substantially increased efficiency. It also is a 50% reduction in NOx emissions and a 75% reduction in noise. So that's a very big bet that we've made. And I know, because you and I talked about this before, Jim, it's a bet that makes sense at $40 a barrel. It's a bet that makes sense at $80 a barrel. And given the longevity of aerospace products, it's not something that we're feeling a little bit shaky about, having invested all of this money and now we have cheap oil out there. It's, you know, the lifetime of a jet engine is measured in sort of 25 or 30 year time frame. So that's a big part of it. I will say it has caused the industry to also find other ways. So, you know, while we think this is the most terrific engine God ever put on the face of the earth, my competitors, who are good colleagues and good competitors, have responded with other technical solutions. So you are going to see in the mid-range commercial market a real significant step change in fuel consumption. Finally, should make a point, until 3 years ago, there was about a 5 or 6 year period where the integrated commercial airline industry lost money. Low fuel helps that. More efficient engines also help that going forward.
So somebody in your company, or some group of people, and probably the board of directors were involved, made a decision to spend a lot of money to make a more fuel-efficient engine. Why did you do it? What was the fundamental reason?
Well, there were two reasons. One, because the market demanded it. Second, because there was a segment of the market that we hadn't played in a substantial amount of time, and it was a re-entry into that market for us.
How did you feel the market demanding it? How was that translated to you?
So the driver comes from the airlines. The driver comes from the airlines saying, as an industry, I'm losing money, and 6 or 7 years ago, we were not predicting fuel at this point. So airlines around the world began to put pressure on Airbus and Boeing in particular. And the two largest planes in the market at that point, the A320 and the 737, had been around for a long time. There was a lot of pressure on the airlines to generate new single-aisle commercial aircraft. We were able to provide a solution that allowed Airbus and, let's say Airbus on our side, to allow Airbus not to have to make an entire new airplane, to just re-engine an airplane. Just is the difference between spending $1 billion or two on an airplane or $10 to $15 billion on a completely new aircraft. So the pressure comes from the market, comes from the airlines. The airlines put pressure on the aircraft companies. The aircraft companies come to us for solutions, and we had a solution that we were willing to invest in with the airlines to make that happen.
And not to underline the obvious, which I'm going to do anyway, this is pretty much a private sector competitive process. You're competing with with other really sophisticated companies, and if you don't do that, you lose their business.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these are the most skilled competitors in the world. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart, and we are not alone as being very good at what we do.
Okay, so let's turn to buildings, and let's talk about climate control, air conditioning. You're a heavily player, but you also do some heating too. You have heat pumps and so forth. Can you talk about what has been done in making just air conditioning more efficient? Is it a big hit, or has it been very little changes?
So it's been a significant change. There's a couple of themes here. So on the HVAC side of the business, there has been a steady combination of both what the market needs, what the technology will permit, and also what regulatory agreements with the government have put pressure on us to achieve. So, you know, we are successively moving from SEER, seasonally adjusted energy efficiency ratings, SEER 10 years ago, sort of a SEER 10 kind of HVAC system, up to SEER 13, 15, now SEER 18 systems in the marketplace. So substantial energy reduction that has occurred. It's also very important to recognize that in the air conditioning industry, the refrigerant portion of the equation is also very important. So making sure that we understand what we're doing relative to Montreal protocols. So just the refrigerant itself, let alone the energy efficiency of the air conditioner as it's being used. Those are very important parts of the calculus that we all go through.
Now, there's some evidence that there are barriers in commercial buildings in getting as much energy efficiency as possible, and it's in your interest to have that more energy efficiency. What needs to be done to get commercial building owners to put energy savings higher on their priority list?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the equation for residential is very different. Residential is really a return on investment calculation for the person who pays the money. The challenge in buildings, and people know this word, is the challenge is the split incentive. It's in a building that I build, I own, I operate, it feels like a residential building. So I make a financial calculation as to what systems I should install, what systems I should upgrade, et cetera. In a large-scale commercial building, that is very rarely the case. So the person who builds the building isn't the person who owns the building, isn't the person who operates in the building. And so there's a number of things that have to come together to really, in addition to the technology side. So one element of that is, surprisingly, it is only now really, there's really a corpus of evidence that is showing that energy efficient buildings have value for the owner. So there's the person in the building who has to pay the heating bill. But it's only in recent years that studies are coming out that show that more energy efficient buildings have higher occupancy rates, that they carry premiums on their rental cost per square foot. And more important, there's a lot of new data that's coming out that is showing that buildings that are energy efficient are also greener and are therefore more productive. And there's good data that we've helped sponsor to show that those buildings are more productive. So that's a big issue. I do think there is significant work we all need to be doing to help understand the business models that will be necessary to take energy efficient solutions at the whole building level. The technology is emerging very rapidly. New air conditioners, new elevators, new control systems, new social media, web adapted systems for bringing information into buildings. That is continuing at a very rapid and very good pace. I think the real challenge in front of us now is to get the building business model done correctly.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you had about 30% reduction of energy use. Was a large fraction of that simply outsourcing of what you did, or was that mostly, almost entirely what you did internally?
Yeah, actually only about 10% of it was outsourcing. It turns out that most of it had to do with changes in the embodied energy of the products we make. It had to do then with operational changes in our factories. So we invested very heavily in cogen capability around the company over the last decade or so. And then it's just a million blocking and tackling solutions that you simply need to get a checklist and go after it one by one by one. It's making sure the gas lines are not leaking for the high pressure gas in the factories. It's relighting. It's all of those kind of things that, oh, by the way, substantially contribute to the safety of the workforce we have in our factories and offices.
And let me just add to that, and looking at a group of other industries, we've talked about that there's no silver bullet. Maybe there's silver buckshot. I actually think there's a lot of silver birdshot, not even silver buckshot, because you see many of these industries and they say, well, it's just what we do every day, fixing every valve, every leak here and there, and it's boring. It just makes a big difference if you keep blocking and tackling all the way around. And I think you see that. Is that fair, that you're not alone on that?
I think that's absolutely right. And I also think it's when we begin to think about how a solution for one problem adds value to another. So, as I said, when we relit our factories, there's a substantial reduction in energy, but it changed really dramatically the appearance of the factories and the way we do work in the factories. Let me give you another example on the product side. So we, about 5 years ago, began to sell regenerative elevators. It's a simple concept, and in fact, we used to describe it as a Prius battery on an elevator. Turns out it's probably a Tesla battery now, I'm not sure. But I mean, basically, when the elevator is differentially unloaded coming down, we store the energy that comes from the braking system, put it in a battery. It saves 75% of the energy on the elevator. So that's a good thing by itself. Elevators are not a huge consumer of energy in a building, but you save 75%, it's a big deal. The interesting thing is, in India, the value of a regenerative elevator probably is not the 75% energy it saves. It's the fact that the elevator continues to run the 10 times a day when the power goes out in the building. So it's bringing those two solutions together in our factories or with our customers that adds, an additional element to the equation.
Now, you also work around the world. If you're looking at additional opportunities for efficiency in heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems around the world, is there a lot of headroom there, or are they jumping across the traditional technology so there's little headroom left?
I think there's a lot of headroom. I think partially the headroom has to do with what is actually happening. So some of you have heard me use this statistic before. So in the United States, 85% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 are already in existence. And so in the United States, energy efficiency in buildings is a retrofit problem. In India, 85% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 have not yet been built. And so the question is, can we bring the latest technology? Can we do a mobile phone-like analog to places in the developing world where substantial building will occur? If you look at UTC, in total, there is a fundamental driver for all of our businesses, and that driver is the growth of the middle class. The growth of the middle class means two things for us as a company. It means that, and everybody's got a different number, some number between 70 and 100 million people a year are urbanizing. And when they urbanize, they live in high-rise buildings, and they buy the products, they need the products we have, as you were saying. The other astonishing statistic that tells us why we want to be in the aerospace business for the long term is that more than 80% of the people on the world have not yet been in an airplane. And as the world middle class grows, the number of people who will fly will grow dramatically. And if we cannot provide the energy efficient solutions now and bet on the come that we'll retrofit them later, I think we have a much more substantial problem than we think.
Okay, so this will be the last question. You and I have talked more about the things that you did for competitive reasons. Is a significant fraction of what you're doing because of a set of government regulations, or are they there but, less important? Can you quantify in some way?
I'll make a number up, so don't anybody quote me on the number. 80 to 90% of what we do is market-driven. Only a very small fraction is driven by government regulations. The government regulations have more to do with emissions than they do with efficiency. And I would also say on the HVAC side of the business, the way let's talk about the U.S. for a moment. The way we operate with the U.S. to create the standards is significantly better than it was 15 or 20 years ago. It is an ongoing positive dialogue. There are both sides to all issues, but we have a lot of evidence over the last 4 or 5 years that a set of voluntary conversations that occur between the industry as companies, between the industry as industry groups, and the government are leading to substantial changes in the regulatory profile, meaning increased regulation, but increased regulation that is backed up by a technical path to get there. So that 10 or 15% is less onerous than it was 15 years ago.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Part of the point was, if you get to the industrial sector where the biggest things have happened in energy efficiency, you've got to study the whole economy. We wanted to give you a slice from one company that's making a big difference. So thank you, Michael. Thank you.